Hello everyone, and welcome to the final Backyard Farmer Show of the season. And thanks also to our wonderful audience for being here. This is a taped show, so of course we cannot take your questions, but that does not mean you can't send us an email, byf@unl.edu. We will try to get to that as soon as possible, but we might take a little email break. We also want to encourage you to continue to watch Backyard Farmer during the season, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube, and then of course our lifestyle gardening show that starts in January. So let us start first with samples. Okay. Jody.
So I was gonna bring, actually I did bring a different sample, but my daughter's in the garden today and I asked her to find me a native praying mantis. And here she is. So this is a Carolina mantid. These are our native mantids in our garden, so if we see these, we want to just appreciate them. They're very camouflaged, so they may be a bright green, dark green, kind of mottled. The female, like this, I can keep close because she doesn't have full wings, so she's not too mobile. She eats live insects and other invertebrates in the garden. The males, they look similar, but they have a very rolled up wings, and they're very they're very skinny and they're quick and they'll fly away. So you can't catch them like this. Their ootheca, or their egg case, are not those big spongy masses, but they're like little tiny purses, and they get stuck to like buildings even, or anywhere there's going to be some prey. So these are the ones, if you're gonna purchase any for your garden or for your greenhouse, it's gonna be these ones, the Carolina mantid, because these are the native ones that we see everywhere. And I will probably just release her when she goes.
Awesome.
She's giving me a stare down.
She is. Hey. Those eyes are bigger than yours, Bill.
Yeah.
All right, so she'll sit there and maybe go away. And Bill, your sample is, I think, beneath this.
Yeah, I forgot a sample today. No. You know, it's the last show of the year. I know football season is starting, and we're excited to do our lawn management in the spring, and then the fall we're kind of exhausted and we just stop. And so this really is a great time though for taking care of our lawn for next year. And so we look at the area we're at right now. It's shaded, it's compacted from all the traffic by the Backyard Farmer Garden. This is the time we want to do some renovation. And so if our lawns are just kind of thin, great time to fertilize right now. So you can go out and you can fertilize your lawns. If you have some weeds, you could always go out and start with those selective herbicides, or things like Creeping Charlie or dandelions. Those sprays start mid-October and can go in through mid-September and go in through October. And if you have a site like this, it's kind of thin, you might even think about just trying to kill off all the vegetation here, because it's mainly just weeds. Helping the soil by tilling in some compost, that's great for our soil. It's really going to help it resist compaction in future years. And then seeds. So our seeding window is still open through most of the state, although it is rapidly closing, which is weird because a lot of the state was still in the 90s last week. And so you might not think the seeding window is closing, but those frosts will start coming. And so get that seed in the ground sooner than later, so that next year you can have a nice looking lawn.
It is a little unfortunate that the turf for our backyard farmer garden looks like, not turf.
Well, and this is just the spot. We're underneath a tree, we're compacted, right? And so it's tough to manage grass here.
Exactly. All right, Dennis, you have no snakes.
No, I'm being nice to Terry. But it's the time of year where fox squirrels and many of our vertebrate animals need to fatten up, including myself, it seems like, for the winter. And so they're going wild after all the seed material. So if you find these things under your trees, your conifers, this is from squirrels, fox squirrels. And they've been feeding on all this, they're leaving the tips. And this is one that had fallen, they've been feeding on it. And also with the oaks, if you see oaks that are brown and fallen, look at the end. If it looks like they're pinched off with teeth, then that's from a squirrel. If it looks like it was dug around, then that was probably from an insect, and you have to talk to Jody. But as you can see, these were dropped by the squirrel. Then the squirrel will go over and eat them and fill itself up. Now, squirrels and trees, especially native trees, especially mature trees, have been around together for eons. It's not something to worry about, okay? You can rake up these things before you mow, or rake them up when the leaves fall. There really is no reason to get rid of the squirrels. If you do, more squirrels are just going to move in, and it's not harming the tree or the acorns when they do this, because this is a part that's going to do anything in the ground.
All right, thank you, Dennis. Elizabeth, beautiful flowers out of our backyard farmer garden.
Yep, I took these out of the backyard farmer garden. I saw these out at State Fair when we were out at Raising Nebraska, and they just were gorgeous. What it is it's Verbena bonariensis. I know this is one of my master gardener's favorite flowers because it seeds itself readily and it just takes over. And it's super fun because it's what Kim and Terry refer to as a scrim plant. For those of you that know about theater, there's the scrim curtain where you can see behind it. I don't know, I wasn't that much of a theater nerd. But what this is it's a taller plant where you can still see through it. So you can put it in there, you can still have that illusion of those flowers, but then you can still see what's behind it. So this is one that's really open, it's really airy, it's one of the taller ones. Pollinators love it. And also it's one of those, like I said, it does tend to seed itself readily. So if you want it to naturalize in an area, let it do its thing. Right now, if you don't want it to naturalize, we'd be looking at trying to trim these off before the seeds set because we don't want them to mature and then scatter to the ground. But this one's a really fun one. It's an annual. It's got a square stem, so it's in that mint family. And it is one of those that, you know, once you see it, you want to know what it is because it's really pretty.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Elizabeth. All right, Jody, first round of picture questions for you. This is a viewer who found caterpillars in his willows, and they're shrubs, so it's a shrubby willow of some sort. He sent us a couple of really excellent pictures of this and wonders what this is.
So that's a great picture and good scale. That is not a caterpillar though. That is the larva of a sawfly called the elm sawfly. Sawflies are a type of wasp that we really aren't too concerned with, but these sawflies can defoliate like maples, birches, willows, so ornamental plants and trees, but they usually don't really ruin the tree. So sometimes if you see this, you can like spray them down, but they will fall down out of the tree and start to pupate by the base of the tree. Not usually something to worry about, but they are like the largest sawfly, so they could be up to 2 inches. And yeah, that's what they look like. Very interesting.
Pretty interesting, and it's great that he put that pen in there for some scale. So your next picture, this is a viewer from Bellevue. He listened to us last week talking about worms, or 2 weeks ago. He says he has these in his yard. They're usually found near the surface, break off tails. They have a white neck, uniformly shaped. They act like snakes when he tries to pick them up, and he thinks they are jumping worms.
Okay, so that really concerned me when I saw the picture, and then that confirms to me that these are Asian jumping worms, which is an invasive species. So at this time, I would recommend going to the Nebraska Invasives Species Council and reporting that. So for anyone who doesn't know about these, they do act very strange. They are smooth and glossy, not slimy. They've got that clitellum that goes around, which is the egg production place of a worm, I guess. And it goes all the way around, and it's very smooth and not raised. But these will pretty much destroy the soil. They will not allow any nutrients in the soil to be left. And so this is something that you're going to want to dig up and destroy, put it in a bag, throw it out what you can, and clean your garden tools. Don't move any of the soil to other places because of the cocoons in there. But yeah, contact Nebraska Invasives.
And we'll put that up on our website for people.
Please.
All right, thanks, Jody. Okay, Bill, your first questions here. He says he does love lime green popsicles, but he does not love lime green grass.
Yeah.
What causes this?
Yeah.
And he wants it to be lush and green, and a couple of the pictures show like an arc of beautiful green. He has put on 3 of 4 4-step program. So.
All right, this is really cool for a soil science fertility nerd that I am. This is iron chlorosis, or iron deficiency, that leads to chlorosis, which means yellowing of the grass leaf. It's really common in our bluegrass lawns, especially in mid to late summer when the soils are really wet. So think of all the rain that we've had, especially around Grand Island, and then you're still having these warm days. What happened is the roots are starting to lose their function to be able to take up iron from the soil. And so what's happening is the fertilizer you're putting down, the nitrogen, you're putting that down as a granular. So even if it contains iron in the fertilizer, it doesn't matter because you put it on the soil and then the roots can't take it up. But then the nitrogen in the fertilizer stimulates that grass to grow. We call that nutrient demand. So now it's growing faster, but it can't take up iron because it's too wet and it becomes more chlorotic. So instead of it becoming darker green, it becomes more lime green and yellow green. So how do you treat this? One thing is you want to limit watering when the soil's really wet, especially this time of the year. The second thing you want to do is be careful with nitrogen fertilizer because that's going to stimulate excessive growth and more yellowing. And then third thing is you can get liquid formulations of iron or even iron sulfate that you can dissolve in water, and then you spray apply it to the leaves and the iron can get into the leaves that way. And since the roots can't take it up, we can directly add it to the leaves. And you have to do that every couple of weeks though, because once the leaves are mowed off, then you need to replenish the iron, and so they have to use some more of that iron spray. So those are your three things. Add the fertilizer, cut down the water, or add the iron, cut down the water, and cut down nitrogen fertilizer until the soils cool off.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Bill. And go enjoy those lime green popsicles.
Exactly.
All right, Dennis, you
Yeah.
didn't bring a snake, but we have a picture of a snake that this,
Okay.
this is at Walnut Creek. And I think you'll probably be proud of her that she didn't squish it or
Good.
something.
So
to
actually, this
start
is a
with.
full-grown Decay's brown snake, Storia decayi. You notice they have a real small neck and head. That's because they eat slugs and they put their head into small land snails and pull the slugs out. So they love escargot. And this is full-grown, like I said. They don't get over a foot, and they have live young. And they, our ones in the lab had live young 2 weeks ago, and the young look like an inchworm, or 2.5 centimeter worm, and they're only that big. No problem whatsoever. They're great. They're common in the eastern half of the state, and they eat slugs.
All right, awesome. So you have another set of pictures, and this is not snakes. This is, she's calling them dirt hills all over the north-facing flower beds in front of their house. She thought it was mice tunneling through the flower beds, but they look kind of like giant anthills.
Right. Looking at the side of this one, the way the dirt is, I almost think it could be Cicada Wasp, because usually it's out of one hole and it's granular, and there's no little paw marks in the dirt, because the wasps go in and dig a hole and pull the dirt out in granular. So if it looks very granular and you don't see paw marks in the hole or around the hole or in the pile of dirt, that to me goes towards the Cicada Wasp, which are very common right now. Matter of fact, we have a number of them in front of our building because there's a lot of cicadas around. So I would go that way.
And then what do you do about that?
Jody?
They're almost on their way out right now. They're not too bad. But if you want to make sure, I would pull back that vegetation and look for that U-shaped hole. It might be empty by now. Who knows?
All right, excellent. All right, Elizabeth, you have a set of really interesting, beautiful pictures from all over the state. The first one is actually, she's seen this growing in the ditch or along the side on her farm in Sydney. She doesn't say it's spreading. This year it's blooming in August. What do we think this is? She does want to transplant some.
Okay, so just by looking at the flower structure and the four petals and the way the stamens and everything are, it's one of the primrose, and we're probably looking at the spotting evening primrose with that one. We'd need an actual sample to identify it a little bit better than that, but that's about as close as we're going to get with that one.
And don't dig it up, right?
Don't dig it up. The Department of Roads gets very upset if you dig things from the right-of-way.
All right. So then our second one here, this viewer sent us this picture last April from last fall for identification. This is from Gothenburg, near Lake McConaughey, late September. And she put in the picture of the sunflower to show some scale. So this is a really big, beautiful white.
This is a really cool one. It could be the 10-petaled blazing star or the 10-petal stick leaf. It got its name stick leaf because the leaves are indeed sticky. This one's about 3 to 4 foot tall, blooms in the fall, a really fun one, really unique flower on that one.
All right, and your third one is actually naturalizing in northern Antelope County. She thinks she knows what it is. What is it?
Well, when I looked at this picture, I was like, oh, I know what this is, no big deal. But then when we talk about where it's growing and where it's found, it does look like a cleome, but it's not. What it is it's another one, and I'm Palisandria. There we go, got it. But what it is it's an introduced species, and because it's taking over, there's that concern of it naturalizing and spreading its seed and kind of taking over that particular area. So it's one we want to kind of be on the watch for, but it does look very similar to the cleome or the spider plant.
Excellent. Good job, Elizabeth. Well, we've really enjoyed hearing John Porter talk about tomatoes during the entire growing season, and for his final segment, he's going to be reminding us of a few of those tips that we all should have followed if we really wanted to eat those tomatoes on our BLTs.
So throughout this series on growing tomatoes, we've talked about what you need to be successful to have some great tomatoes in your garden. So today what we're going to do is talk about those things we learned so we can recap them, but also talk about keeping records so you know what to do next year, because I won't always be around to help you. So the first thing we talked about was starting seeds indoors. That's the best way to get the varieties that you want. Then you want to talk about using the correct soil to start them in. You want to use a soilless media that's sterile. You want to use a good light source to keep them nice and healthy and growing strong. And you also want to control the temperature. You don't want to keep them too hot or they will get leggy on you. And then we talked about, well, maybe your seed starting didn't work out so well, or you didn't have time to get that done. So we went to the store and we bought some great tomato plants from a local garden center. We talked about picking out healthy plants, ones that aren't too leggy, and picking out the right variety again. You know, we talked about all the different things that you can look for in a tomato plant, and you want to think about that whenever you're making your selection. Now, what you want to do is to keep notes on what you did throughout the season. So we have a notebook. We're going to write down the things that we grew and how we grew them, even thinking about the weather and even where we planted them. And that was the next step, where we took them out to the garden and we put them in there and we grew them successfully. So we want to write down where we planted them, because then we talked about controlling disease issues, and one of the big things is not planting them in the same place. So even drawing out a little map of your garden so you note that we planted tomatoes here this year, you don't want to plant them here again next year. Finally, we talked about what to do if your tomato has a problem. Sometimes we think everything is a disease, but it's not, and we have to figure out, is it an actual disease, is it an insect, or is it a weather or climate related issue, which we're having a lot more of these days. So looking for those symptoms of a fungus or a bacteria, the spots that we're looking for, and then finding a way to treat them, whether it's a pesticide, an organic treatment, or a biological control. And we talked about several of those different things. Thanks to advances in modern agriculture, you can go to the grocery store and buy a tomato 365 days a year. But because they're developed for storability and not for flavor or texture, sometimes they're like eating cardboard, and you want that homegrown tomato. So you just want to throw that out and try to grow your own at home. We've talked about those steps to be helpful, and we've talked about keeping notes. So with this help, you can try and try again, because remember that it might not be successful the first time, but you get better every time because you learn from your failures. So don't be afraid to experiment in the garden and use some of the things that we talked about, because as the old song talks about, there are only two things that money can't buy, and that's true love and homegrown tomatoes.
You know, we never know what John is actually going to say in these segments, but we have some beautiful plants in our backyard farmer garden, some of them with awesome looking tomatoes on them, others not so nice, and of course Mother Nature gets to decide whether those tomatoes do well or not. So follow those growing tips, take those notes, or start over again next year. All right, Jody, you have a handful of IDs for your next set of pictures,
Okay.
and the first is simply insect ID. What is that?
This is a green June beetle. It's what one of those large white grubs turn out to be. Eats decomposing fruit.
So not a bad guy at all.
Nope, not usually. Well, nothing that needs to be controlled. They're just big and they sound like bumblebees when they fly by.
All right, perfect. Your second one then is, do the names cicadas and locusts refer to the same insect, and are they the ones we seem to get a proliferation of and what garden damage do they do, if any?
Okay, I have a bad memory. So locusts and cicadas are not the same. Most people in Nebraska call cicadas locusts, but they're not. Locusts are very hungry grasshoppers. Those are locusts. They destroy crops. Cicadas are what these are. This picture is of two cicadas mating, and these are what is screaming in the trees right now because the male is looking for a female. So this one did a good job. The last question, what damage do they do? So as adults, they probably only live a month, but we do have these annual cicadas that do stagger themselves out throughout the season of summer, and they will feed on like the sap under the bark. So, I mean, sometimes it shouldn't be something you need to control. Sometimes they do damage twigs when they deposit their eggs though. So if you see that, you can prune those out.
They're excellent cat toys, just so you know.
They're pretty fun.
All right, and you have one more, and this question is, she thought this was a spider, and this is an Omaha viewer.
So this is not a spider, this is a wheel bug. They're amazing predators. They're really big. They could be like over an inch long, but they've got this cog or this wheel as adults and wings. And yeah, I would just not handle them. They look fun, but don't touch. But let them be.
All right, thanks, Jody. Okay, Bill, your question here is, this viewer has this particular plant growing in his buffalo grass with his wildflowers, with his milkweed. Appears to be quite invasive. Is there a pre-emerge that will control it next year? Elizabeth's shaking her head.
Yeah, this is a dayflower. It's something that you know, we can try to pull. It's a prolific seeder, and so trying to do that. I don't know on the pre. Do you guys know on the pre?
It does not work.
Doesn't work.
There's
all
no
right.
pre listed. I've
Elizabeth
tried.
helps. All right.
Yeah.
So thank you, Elizabeth, for the help on that one. Unfortunately, so just try to get that out there before it makes seed. So be aggressive with that would be the strategy you would want to try to take with that guy.
Yeah, and it hides in other plants. And then you have a second one, and this viewer found this one in North Platte. Very large, grows very fast, especially in low-lying areas.
Yep, and this is an invasive weed. This is Smartweed or Japanese knotweed. It goes by a bunch of different names. Again, another prolific seeder that you'd really want to try to get rid of as soon as you can. Try to stay ahead of, although it's going to be a fight with all of our invasives. The reason they're invasive is because they are really able to flourish in our environment. So best of luck to you, unfortunately, I think, with that one.
All right, thanks, Bill. Dennis, this is a viewer who says tomatoes she put on the kitchen counter, they were perfect when she put them on the counter, and then they looked like this, and she thought it was an insect. So this is tomatoes that have been chewed somehow or another sitting on the kitchen counter.
Yeah, so I would say if it's indoors in the kitchen counter, you have mice in the house. And so rodents, and it'd probably be house mice more than anything else. If you're out in the country, it could be deer mice or whitefoot mice. But by the small little chunks taken out on there by the skin, you definitely have some, mice around the house. So you might want to get rid of them before the holidays. So it's not just was the night before Christmas and all through the house. You don't want anything stirring, not even that mouse. So the best thing is traps, not poisons, because you don't want to use poisons indoors because there's no poison that'll kill mouse quicker than 5 days, and it doesn't dry them up. That's a fallacy, and you would have a smell and then a rotting problem. So go with traps, either snap traps, and there's a lot of different traps on the market today that work very well. And for bait, you can use rolled oats with a little peanut butter, or get some rolled oats and roll them into tomatoes. And you'll have to snap trap them or box trap them. They sell small little box traps if you want to use those as well.
All right, and you have one more, Dennis, and this is an Omaha viewer who said something is climbing his apple trees and eating his apples.
Yeah, that'll be a squirrel, fox squirrel.
All right.
And apples are just like the nuts I showed you to a squirrel. They need to fatten up for the winter, and they will go after those apples. And again, they wait till they're just about ready before you're ready to pick them, and they're only going to eat half of each of them, just to show you the difference. And I think the squirrels around where there's apples and tomatoes may be on Twitter or Facebook. So as soon as you say, I'm going to go pick my tomatoes tomorrow, they go out that night. So I would say off social media, because I think the squirrels are on social media.
And I would have to attest to that. I've never gotten one apple off my apple trees.
Because you put out on, you're going to go out the next day.
I
it
announced
happens.
it somehow.
Yep.
All right, Elizabeth, we have maples again. This is a viewer that we actually did show a picture. We talked about this, and this is Orleans, Nebraska. It's about 5 years old. We said probably planted too deep. She sent us some more pictures. Is this a keeper or a goer?
My guess is come spring, it's probably going to be a goer. Just the way that it's leafed out, it's not leafed out very well. The leaves are smaller than normal. They're really sparse. So I don't see that tree surviving long term. While it will set its buds this fall for next spring, it's probably going to have a whole bunch of helicopters on it because it's having its last gas.
Right.
So if it was me, come next spring, I'd go ahead and I'd just take it out. Be sure to kill the root system on it, otherwise you're going to have those little suckers come up from where you take the tree out with that one.
And that last one was a bigger maple from a different location. So
yeah,
half
that
the
Crimson
tree-
King with half the trunk that's dead, and
Right.
that one, at least you want to remove the dead limbs on that one, so at least make it through the winter. Anytime we see more than 1/3 of the canopy get removed, we know that tree is going to be stressed, and it might not be a quality tree long term because it looked like it was kind of lopsided with that. Now maples do tend to have a weaker wood just because they're faster growing. So with that Crimson King or Crimson Queen maple, we're probably looking at possibly removal of that one and starting over with a quality plant.
Not possibly removing. Removing.
I know some people want to limp along for as long as possible.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. All right, so we're just going to go to regular questions here for a minute. Jody, this is a viewer who's in Boone County admitting to being a master gardener and admitting that the grub control did not go down. Is it too late?
I believe it's too late. Correct?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that one. It's too late. The grub control, it needs to go down right before 4th of July when the grubs are easy to kill. And there are things that can provide some kill. Matt talked about them last week for his sample. Unfortunately, just try to keep that sod moist. If we have dry spells, a little water. And hopefully when the grubs start to go a little deeper, that grass can put some roots down in the winter and be able to survive.
All right, and you still get a question, Bill.
Oh,
So,
no. All right.
This is a viewer who said you can transition a lawn to a newer grass species by overseeding with the newer seed year after year, and eventually the older varieties will sort of die out. He'd rather do that than kill, till, and start completely over again.
Yeah, it's definitely possible, but you gotta think, there's a certain level of ecology there. The plant that is gonna be most adapt for that climate and that lawn is gonna be the one that's gonna linger. So you might pick one that has the latest and greatest genetics, but if the old variety maybe has some feature about it that makes it be able to stand up and tolerate it better than the new variety, you're probably gonna have pretty poor success. Even, my lawn, we converted it to tall fescue, and there was still some bluegrass in there, and there's a lot of bluegrass coming back because however I'm managing it, the bluegrass is preferring in the tall fescue. So it's going to kind of be whatever grass is best adapted to there is going to be the one that wins, and management might help push one or the other, but just picking new seed might not be the solution.
All right, thanks, Bill. Okay, Dennis, this is a viewer who has one bat in the basement. How to get it out?
Okay, so try to figure out how it came in. If there's not many ways the bat can get into the basement, like open windows or hatch doors, it probably came down the flue for your hot water heater. The flue comes down and there's a funnel, and there's a space like that. Bats come down the chimney, down there, and then they can come out where the hot water is. So to prevent any more bats, put 1/4-inch mesh around where that inverted funnel is. You'll still get airflow, but the bat can't get out. The next, it's going to have to be, so to speak, glove in hand, combat to find out where that bat is and get it out. It wants to get out. It's going to be hidden. You can look for the droppings. If you see droppings, they're probably hanging above, and they're dropping straight down when they hang above, and they might be in a crevice, probably in an unfinished part of the basement. And so trying to get to it and get it out with a gloved hand, a leather gloved hand, and toss it out, evict them that way.
All right, thanks, Dennis. Elizabeth, this is a viewer who has tomatoes, and they've developed cracks at the stem end while they're still on the vine. And then, of course, she describes this as white yuck in those cracks after they develop within a day or two. Any ideas on what's causing that, and can the rest of that tomato still be eaten?
So a lot of times we'll see that as an environmental condition. It's tomato crack. What happens is that tomato is just about ripe, and then we get that untimely rain. That tomato takes in that moisture, and then it just splits its skin. And so anytime we have that crack, we have that possibility for those rot fungi to get in there. And so with that, you probably could cut off the rest of the tomato and eat it, as long as you get it quickly enough. I wouldn't process it though, just because of the potential of invading bacteria and fungi and stuff like that. But some varieties are crack resistant. This year, all bets are off. It doesn't seem to matter. It seemed like even the crack resistant ones were cracking. So if you're looking at picking your tomatoes and you know a rain event is on the way, I'd pick anything with any little bit of color on there, and they'll continue to ripen indoors, and then you don't have to worry about them taking in that moisture and potentially cracking.
All right, thanks, Elizabeth. Well, it is time for us to take a short break. Right now, we are going to have Elizabeth talk about the plants of the week.
Yes, we have some very nice plants of the week. So we're gonna start with the pink one in the middle. This is a really cool one called Turtlehead. So a really fun, common name. This is one called Hot Lips. So Hot Lips Turtlehead. It's a slow colonizer. It really likes those wet environments, and it is behind me in the Backyard Farmer Garden rain chain, and it does really well back there. It can stand that shade to part shade environment, and it's a really tough one. So if you've got one of those wet spots, that Hot Lips Turtlehead is a really fun one that we have. On the other hand, we have a really tall one. This one is Wendy's Wish Salvia. So we have lots of annual salvias out there. This one is a really tall annual salvia called Wendy's Wish. It's really beautiful. It's really easy to take care of, and it really likes that sun. So we've got the one for the wet, we've got the one that's easy to take care of. We've got two really nice plants here.
In perfect pink for fall.
And a lovely pink color for fall.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, you are up next, Jody, with questions. I'm not sure where this viewer's from, but he said all the apples and the pears on his trees have bad cores or rot, and he's got pictures of both the apple and the pear. He's wondering, is it an insect, a worm, a rot, a spot, or what?
It's an insect, and it looks like a worm. It's probably a coddling moth. So they just pretty much destroy the pits in the core of there. And so it looks kind of okay from the outside, but when you cut into them, they're pretty rotten. So when it comes to apples and pears, you're gonna want to be on like a spray schedule for this season. So it's not something that you can just fix right now. It's a lot of research and making sure you have the equipment, safety, the right chemical, and then also, the schedule. So that's going to be starting next year, but you want to just make sure you keep them healthy, clean up, sanitation, get all those fruits out of there. So.
All right, and I know we had some segments last year about early spray schedules.
Yeah, and there are some really good like fruit tree schedules on. I know Missouri's got a good one, and maybe Purdue, I don't know.
Right.
Can talk to your local horticulturist, but it's a lot of work to have good fruit trees. I myself have a bad fruit tree, so.
All right, thanks, Jody.
I know that.
Okay, Bill, this is a viewer they're in Lincoln, and they say in late April, early May, they do crabgrass pre-emerge, usually effective until late July or early August. Looks like it has appeared again, and they're wondering, should they put down 2 applications of that pre-emerge? And they sent 2 pictures.
Yeah, the first picture actually is tall fescue. So that is a little bit more distinctive in how it looks. It's a tall fescue plant that just might have got in there some way, might have flowed down the sidewalk in water and kind of made a little seed there, and that's just a tall fescue plant. I would just cut that out with a knife. It's a bunch type grass. It won't spread anymore. The second picture is crabgrass. If you made a pre-emergent application, it is possible that you had some breakthrough, like you stated. That's why we talk about not going out too early. People want to go out in March and April because we're excited to go and start summer off with our first application. But honestly, like especially in Lincoln, first week of May usually is fine. If you're going to be early, then you might need to do a second application, which I'm okay with. If you really have a lot of crabgrass pressure there, you're trying to control lawn that had a lot of crabgrass in the past, then a second app would be good, and that would happen in mid to late June following your first application, and that should get you through the full season.
All right, thanks, Bill.
Yep.
Okay, Dennis, you have 2 different sets of holes in the yard from 2 different sets of viewers. The first one here is Ord. She said everywhere there is a mound of dirt, the grass is totally gone. She says it's spreading. What is this?
Well, that's earthworms.
They said it to me too.
Yeah, so
Well, they're critters of some sort.
you got a lot of moisture, you got a lot of
Yeah.
earthworms, and I don't know why the grass is dying, because earthworms don't touch the grass. It might have got too wet. Maybe you can come in on that. But all those mounds are earthworms. Now you may have those holes opened up by birds going in there and pecking to get the earthworms out. But that is just a lot of nice earthworms. Go fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but underneath that one, what it was is it was a linden, and so it had Kentucky bluegrass under the linden.
Oh, so we know the background on this one, do we?
We do. They sent it to me too.
All right, and your next one, Dennis, then is what is digging a hole under my garage foundation? They have moles, but this is something very different.
Yeah.
They've been there for almost 20 years, 30 years, and they have never had this before. This is Blair.
Yeah, that looks pretty good size. Looks about 10 inches in diameter, so that's probably a woodchuck or groundhog. And they'll dig a big mound, and they'll go pretty far underneath there. These guys are diurnal, so you might see them. If it's less than 10 inches and the mound is less than 2 foot, it could be Franklin's ground squirrel. What county are they in?
They're Blair, so Washington County.
Blair. So you can have definitely woodchucks and definitely Franklin ground squirrels in Washington County. So the thing is to try to get some footprints. You can put some powder there like talc or flour and get the prints of the animal, take a picture of it and send it to us, and we'll tell you which one it is, and then you can trap for it.
All right, thank you, Dennis. Elizabeth, this is a Lincoln viewer. They have a beautiful specimen of, we think it's Prairie Statesman, probably pine, but there's some dead at the top, and they're wondering, is there a reasonable remedy for this one? What do you think here?
So anytime that we have the death of an evergreen, it's not going to re-sprout from that. The only hope is if there's any buds around the side. So their best bet is to, I know it's going to be hard for them to prune out the dead, but prune out the dead. The thing to keep in mind is if it has multiple leaders on it, we might have lost the apical stem, the growing point of that, and it might just continue to get a little taller. It might not get any, or wider, it might not get any taller with that one. And so that's going to be the hard part, is to know whether or not we've killed the leader or not, and it's really difficult to try to retrain a new leader, especially on a tree of that size. So unfortunately, there's not going to be a whole lot they can do other than prune out the dead.
All right, and your next set of pictures is a pin oak. Just pictures. What the heck here? Is this a keeper or is this a goer?
You know, that's a tough environment for any tree to grow in. You've got the heat and reflection from the concrete on either side. You've got a restricted root zone in that. And then we add insult to injury and we put a pin oak in there, which is known for iron chlorosis and other issues with this one. So I can't see this tree being a long-term tree in that species or in that spot, just because of the species, the location, and things like that. It's always nice to have a tree over your driveway, but unfortunately, I don't think that one's going to be a long-term tree.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Well, you know, it's really hard to imagine that 10 years ago, this did not exist. It was mostly a little bit of that not very good turf, but with a huge amount of planting, digging, weeding, pruning, all the things that go into managing a garden, including a lot of help from master gardeners. this is what we have today, 10 years later in the Backyard Farmer Garden. If you've watched us on Backyard Farmer or you've heard us on Backyard Farmer, you know that Terry and I are absolutely the boots on the ground and instrumental in the Backyard Farmer Garden. And we thought it would really be fun to talk about both our experience in how we got this accomplished and then what you see when you come to visit, and maybe give you a little bit of cautionary note about what you can and cannot do when you come to the Backyard Farmer Garden. So Terry, the first piece was this piece, which happened before you got here. So what do you think?
Well, I think it's good. I mean, this is basically what we need for plant ID for students, but also for the homeowner, for them to be able to see more landscape size shrubs, perennials, those kinds of things permanent in your yard that would fit in a homeowner's backyard.
And this is all perennial, and so 14 or 15 years worth of additions, subtractions, reversions, which again is what we would really expect a homeowner to experience in their own home landscape. So how about the next piece, which is actually celebrating its 10 years in existence?
So the Backyard Farmer Garden started in 2009, right after I got here. It started out as a 10 by 10 plot, and the reason it started was because we got the All-America Selection winter display garden here. We needed a place to put it, so we dug up a 10 by 10 spot, which every homeowner should do, is start small and add on, and that's what we've done.
And then that piece, which is the annual piece, I seem to recall something about a giant pile of compost and topsoil.
Yep, we did everything the right way. We may have timed it a little bit differently just because of having to get stuff in the ground. But yes, we turned the soil over. We did use a big tiller on the back of a tractor, but we did turn it all over mechanically. Then we added 20 yards of compost by hand.
So 10 years later, or actually 8 years later, 7, we added the rain chain across the front, which is I think going into its 4th fall.
Yep.
And that again gives our homeowners another piece, which is you too could capture the rain.
Yep.
So that one works too?
It works really well. We've been out here on some major rain storms here in Lincoln. We know that it works. It holds the water. It helps clean the water as the water goes through the soil profile. It adds another dimension to our garden.
So we love our visitors to the Backyard Farmer Garden. What would we both like to tell them?
I would tell them they need to visit multiple times a year.
Yes.
Between putting the annuals in, the springtime perennials that bloom, annuals coming in, and then the rain chain really is in its prime in the fall. So visit at least once a month if possible.
And park north of the building on the weekend?
Yep,
or
free parking on campus on weekends.
Yeah.
A little bit harder during school when students are here. A little bit easier in the summertime, but you still have to pay for parking during the week.
Exactly. And of course, to all of our loyal fans, tell us you love us, because we love to hear that in the Backyard Farmer Garden. And it really is an amazing space. We want everybody to visit from all over the state and surroundings, early, often, and let's see what happens in the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years in the Backyard Farmer Garden. All right, Jody, last round of picture questions for you. Okay. This is a viewer from Nebraska City. She sent this late August, and she wants to know what she can do to prevent this next year. She sprayed everything for the Japanese beetles.
Okay, so for Japanese beetles for next year, she can, for her roses, do systemic around Mother's Day so that there's enough time for it to get into the plant. And for roses, evidently it's going to be fine for the pollinators, and so that's why it's all right for that. There are, make sure to read the label, but spraying weekly is probably not what you want to do next year, so get ahead of it and try to do some prevention. If you're still seeing some Japanese beetles, which are on their way out right now, you can just stick them in some soapy water.
All right, and that second picture was a wheel bug eating one, right?
Yes, so the wheel bug, as we saw earlier, is on our side. So they're one of the predators. A lot of spiders will prey on Japanese beetles as well.
And what's this?
And this is fall webworm. So there are tent caterpillars whenever you see these webbings up in the tree, but with the fall webworm, they're not like in the crotch of the tree, they're further away, and they can really infest any type of deciduous tree. So you can take a rake or whatever you can do to break those up. They should fall to the ground, and there should be predators or birds that will eat them. There usually isn't too much control. If you see them young, you can use BT. But otherwise, you can break up that web.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Jody. All right, so Bill, this is one of your favorite weed questions since you're so good with them.
Yeah,
but
love weeds in beds.
This is a viewer who has poison ivy about 18 inches from probably a Boston ivy and some other plants. He wonders whether the ortho poison ivy spray or any of the sprays would be translocated under and into, and the hort person down there is going, yeah, maybe. So how would you suggest that he take care of the poison ivy here?
Yeah, I think you got to be really careful with that. I mean, unfortunately, there's not a lot of vegetation that is directly below, and so you can be just very careful in how you're spraying, but you could still get some in the soil. I think, how well that would translocate, that could be an issue. Just be careful how you spray. Things like Roundup, actually Roundup binds extremely tightly to the soil, so that would be one that I think might be a little safer than some of the other herbicides that might linger in the soil a little bit more and could move to those off targets. So that might be your best bet at something like a Roundup, and just be very careful so that you're not overspraying onto any of the plants that you want to minimize that movement onto that ivy wall.
All right, thanks, Bill. All right, this is a question, Dennis, from Gretna.
Okay.
It is on the north wall of a ground level patio, and they clean it up regularly, but it or they always come back. And he's not talking about the shiny penny.
Yeah, I understand that. Those are bat droppings, and by the size and the place, Sarpy County, probably the big brown bat. And what they're doing, there must be a light nearby, or light reflecting, or light coming out of a window. And this is just where they come every night to feed. And you feed a little bit, then you hang out and you drop your droppings. You feed a little more, hang out and drop your droppings. And that's a bat's life. It's pretty cool. But so if they're outside, you can just sweep these droppings into the soil and they'll be fine. They'll just be fertilizer. Nothing will come of them if you sweep it into the soil. And they shouldn't be causing a problem. If anything, they're eating flying insects that are around the house. You want to discourage them. You could make sure there's no light in that area at night, so you're not attracting any bugs, and you won't attract the bats as well. Or you can hang just bird netting from that area, staple it to the house or the eave, and they'll get tangled in it and they'll go away.
All right, thank you, Dennis. Elizabeth, this is a viewer who found this after a flood. So the flood water showed up, the plant showed up. She wonders what this is. Is this a keeper, or should she get rid of this one?
There's lots of different ones that it could be. These are all in like the carrot family. We could be looking at poison hemlock, so that's going to have some purple spots on the stem. We could be looking at like a wild carrot or a Queen Anne's lace. So it really depends on what the flower is doing and what it flowers like before I tell them to keep it or get rid of it. If it's a poison hemlock, that's going to get super tall. We're looking 6 foot tall, and it does have poison in it, mainly if you eat it. Some of those other ones, like the wild carrot, the Queen Anne's lace, they're going to be really fine, shorter to the ground. They all have that umbel-like flower to them. So it really depends on what that flower does and what it comes out as next spring. Poison hemlock's a biennial, so the first year rosette, second year can flower. If it was me, I'd probably just take it out because it's probably poison hemlock.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Well, even though it's our last show of the season, of course, we have announcements of wonderful things going on in the gardening world. The 2019 Forest Festival Family Fun Night from the Nebraska Forest Service on Friday, September 13th, 5 to 10. I'm glad I don't have to say that one again, at Horning State Farm. Our second announcement is Art in the Garden with the Noise Art Gallery sponsoring that Saturday the 14th from 11 to 7 in the Sunken Gardens, 27th and D Streets here in Lincoln. The third one is Grow a Row, our produce donations. We are still accepting those Tuesdays from 5 to 7 p.m. in the Backyard Farmer Garden. And our totals for the season thus far, 1,238.4 pounds from the Backyard Farmer Garden. Grow a Row, 254.4 pounds. So we're pretty proud of that. So we have some regular questions coming up now. This one's for you, Jody. Hornets have chewed an opening in the side of their ewe. She's used 7, but maybe not enough. She's been told that vinegar water would kill the nest.
Okay, where's the nest?
In a ewe, in a
So
shrub.
Is it a paper nest?
Must be. She was not specific.
I wouldn't use vinegar. If you do know where the nest is, I would use a wasp spray that you can get, and I would do that at night, wearing a red headlamp or flashlight and a lot of clothes.
Like you
dressed
did
like
last
winter,
week.
yes.
Exactly.
Watch the show from last week.
All right, Bill, this is yet another seeding question. You did talk about killing weeds like 2 weeks ago with Roundup and then reseeding. Is there a waiting period between spraying the Roundup and doing the reseeding?
With the Roundup, again, it needs to be absorbed into green foliage and it binds really tightly to the soil. So each label might say a couple days or something. Just look at the label, but generally it's pretty short. Other herbicides can be much longer. So you always need to read the label and it will say how many days before projected and after projected emergence. So not when you seed, but when do you expect those seedlings to germinate or emerge from the ground. And so that's what you'll find in the bottom of those labels. But Roundup, pretty safe a few days later.
All right, Dennis, a quick question for you. This viewer had a carnelian cherry dogwood that dropped a bunch of fruit. She's worried that it might attract terrible critters.
Well, if fruit drops, the critter I'd be worried about is the yellow jacket. That'll cause the biggest problem. Rotting fruit, at night you'll get opossums, and they're pretty benign. They love rotting things. And if it's not rotted, but just dropping fruit, you may get woodchucks in the area, but they would already be there. So I would think wasp would be a bigger problem with rotting fruit than the vertebrate pest.
All right, thank you, Dennis. All right, Elizabeth, we actually had one picture come in kind of late. And so this person has said they see something that is really sort of shiny back in the landscape. They're not sure what it is. They are here actually with a sample, which might help you a little bit on this particular.
Two-part question. Hi, I'm Eric. I'm Elizabeth's boyfriend. Can you see the sample good from here, or would it be best if I did it from here? Or will you marry me? Hi, baby.
Wow, it's awesome or what?
My mic's hot still.
So's mine.
Bum.
Yeah. Hi.
So we staged that beautifully. Eric, thank you so much.
Thank
Elizabeth,
you all for making this happen.
I assume you gave the right answer because we didn't hear you. That is just awesome, and obviously our audience thinks the same thing too. This is a perfect way to wrap up our season.